This is a quick case overview in the case of Mapp versus Ohio, taking place in 1961. In 1961, the Cleveland Police Department received an anonymous tip that Dolly Mapp and her daughter were harboring a suspect in the Cleveland City bombing. They immediately went to her house and demanded their entrance. Now, when they got there, they knocked on the door, and Mapp immediately called her attorney, and under his advice, she refused them entry because they did not have a warrant. Now, several hours later, more officers came to her door and demanded that they be allowed into her house, and Mapp refused again, but they forcibly opened the door and proceeded in. Later on in that search, Mapp confronted them and demanded to see the search warrant. As we all know, the police did not have a valid search warrant at all, but they did wave a piece of paper in the air claiming it was a warrant. And as arrogant as Mapp was, she took it, she said, "No, it's not," and she shoved it down her shirt. Eventually, the police did gain that warrant back, but the officers cuffed her at her feet and went on to search her entire house for the fugitive. When they reached the basement, they found a trunk containing lewd and lascivious books, aka pornography or obscene photography, etc. Mapp claimed that it wasn't hers and that it was left by a previous tenant that lived in the basement, etc. However, of course, the police weren't going to believe that, seeing as it was a state statute that you were not allowed to have pornography in Ohio. Now, after them arresting her for the possession of it, they never found any evidence or anything to recollect them to the fugitive. Mapp's attorney did question, however, the police about the warrant, but they could not show one. And on appeal, the court affirmed, and Mapp appealed further to the Supreme Court of Ohio. Her attorney argued that she should have never been brought to trial in the first place, simply based on the fact that the police never had a warrant, and that they also determined that they think that the evidence that was obtained should be thrown out just based on the fact that it wasn't found with a search warrant. However, the court stated that the materials were admissible and explained its ruling by differentiating between the evidence that was peacefully taken from an inanimate object, aka the trunk, and forcibly taken from an individual, such as forcibly entering into her house or, forcibly grabbing something out of her hand or somebody else's hands. Some of the court's decisions and rationale was that the Fourth Amendment protected the individual's rights to an unreasonable search and seizure. Now, this does not directly instruct how the government might not use the fruits of an illegal search, but it does kind of explain that people shouldn't be searched and seized illegally, in the sense being that they shouldn't be just searched for no reason at all. There needs to be probable cause and such like that. Or, on the normal traffic stop, yes, you can search for stuff like that, but that's a frisk, that's a Terry stop. Also, two previous cases, Boyd versus United States and Weeks versus United States, the court said that the federal government may not use such evidence because of the exclusionary rule. Now, in Weeks versus United States in 1914, the exclusionary rule was created for federal prosecutions. It was not enforced at all in states until 1949, when it was applied to the case of Wolf versus Colorado. The exclusionary rule, however, was not broadly enforced at the state level until the decision of Mapp versus Ohio. So this was kind of an eye-opening case to most of the country and some of the states. The case was decided in 1961 in Mapp's favor by a vote of 6-3. the court stated that the exclusionary rule applies to states, which means exactly the fact that it is excluded, because the state cannot use evidence gained by illegal means. This also helped the people in the Wolf case because it overturned the ruling. Now, the court's rationale is based on the connection between the 4th and the 14th Amendments. And as Judge Thomas C. Clark wrote, since the 4th Amendment's right of privacy has been declared enforceable against the states through the Due Process Clause of the 14th, it is enforceable against them by the same sanction of exclusion as is used against the federal government. Justice Clark also invoked common sense, stating that the exclusionary rule should be integral to both the 4th and 14th Amendment. He also dismissed the argument that the rule allows criminals to go free as a result of an honest police mistake, which, as we all know, this was not an honest police mistake. It was blatantly obvious that they did not have a warrant, but they presented a piece of paper as if it was. In the concurring opinion, Justice Black expressed doubt that the 4th Amendment alone could be used to prohibit illegally obtained evidence to use in state courts to convict a suspect, simply because the exclusion is not explicitly stated. He also believed the language restricting unreasonable searches and seizures is framed too modestly, meaning that it's not specific enough to allow an interpretation as an exclusionary. But all after said and done, the 4th Amendment's ban against unreasonable search and seizures is considered together with the 5th Amendment in the compelled self-incrimination. All in all, what really happened in this case was, to make a long story short, which I already made long, that Mapp versus Ohio took place with the police doing an illegal search on a house without a warrant. They never showed a warrant. Mapp questioned that, which therefore brought her into the Court of Appeals. Now, she won, but it took her a few trials simply based on the fact that this wasn't really the illegal search and seizures wasn't really that big of a deal up until this case. Same with the exclusionary rule, because this was an eye-opening case when the police, like I said, blatantly did not use a warrant, but they showed something that might have looked like one. But in the end, Mapp ended up winning her case simply based on the fact that it was illegal what the police did, and as we all know, the police should not be doing illegal things, and the courts agreed. So this case was dismissed at 6-3 ruling in Mapp's favor.